Hey everyone, so in the previous three videos, I explained three different types of protectionist measures. I explained tariffs, protectionist subsidies, and protectionist quotas. There are also administrative barriers that governments enact as trade barriers or protectionist measures. In this video, I'm going to discuss the arguments for and against protectionism. So these are exactly the arguments that are listed in your IB Economics syllabus for section 3.1. Discuss the arguments in favor of trade protection. The first argument is that trade protection protects domestic jobs. When there is free trade, a lot of domestic jobs might be lost. The second argument in favor of trade protection is national security. Some people believe that an economy should be self-sufficient and shouldn't have to rely on trade with other countries. Some economists argue that it protects infant industries. These are industries that are new and are still sort of setting up and trying to find their way and stand on their own 2 feet. When you have tariff barriers or quotas or protectionist measures, you help these industries grow. Another argument is the maintenance of health, safety, and environmental standards. Some countries enact administrative barriers to maintain health standards or safety standards, or because they have different environmental standards. Another argument in favor of trade protection is that it protects domestic companies from anti-dumping and unfair competition. Some companies sell their product in overseas markets at a much lower price than their actual cost of producing that product. This is called dumping. So countries can respond by putting tariffs or trade barriers as an anti-dumping measure and to protect their domestic companies from unfair competition. It's also a means of overcoming a balance of payments deficit. So if a country has a balance of payments deficit because it's spending way too much on imports and not earning enough export revenue, it's a way of overcoming that deficit. Last but definitely not least, it's a source of government revenue, especially tariffs. Tariffs raise revenue for the government, and quotas, if the government is selling quota licenses, that could also raise government revenue. So what about the arguments against trade protection? These could also be seen as the arguments for free trade. These are the arguments for having free trade or trade that is not hindered by trade barriers. The first argument is trade protection leads to a misallocation of resources. Whenever governments interfere to not allow the market to operate freely, this leads to inefficiency and misallocation of resources. The second argument is that there's often a danger of retaliation and starting trade wars. Like recently, President Trump has enacted tariff barriers against China, and a lot of people are worried that China might retaliate and enact the same tariff barriers. So this could lead to trade wars, which is not really helpful for anyone involved. The third argument against trade protection is the potential for corruption. Government officials, for example, if there are quotas, government officials might hand out the quota licenses to the foreign producers that, bribe them. Or essentially, when there is trade protection, this gives government officials more power, which they can abuse and can lead to more corruption. It leads to an increased costs of production due to the lack of competition. Remember, competition is good. Competition gives producers an incentive to differentiate themselves and to be committed to quality and to try to lower prices. So if you are protecting domestic producers from foreign competition, this could lead to increased costs of production. It would also lead to higher prices for domestic consumers. Domestic consumers are definitely worse off because they have to pay higher prices for the goods and services that they import from overseas. It could lead to an increased cost of the imported factors of production, especially if it's a country that relies on importing resources and inputs into the production process. And last but definitely not least, it could lead to reduced export competitiveness. Your export industries, your domestic industries that export overseas become less competitive. So these are the arguments for and the arguments against trade protection. which can also be seen as the arguments for and against free trade if you just look at it from the other side. Remember, the learning outcome is to be able to discuss, so you need to be able to provide a balanced discussion of the arguments for and against.